来是分享的时间。那我要先请令他的这个孙女来分享一下他对祖母的怀念。
Last year, I read a poem posted up in the kitchens of my dorm. It didn't mean much to me then because I've never been faced with the death of a loved one. But for some reason, it stuck in my mind and made me want to do something more with my life. It starts, "There's a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came her date of her birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. That dash represents the life we lead. The dates are almost insignificant. It doesn't define who we are or have any influence on who we choose to become. Writing a biography for a living person is hard. Writing a eulogy is even harder. I feel the need to honor all her accomplishments and at the same time all her quirks. But that's impossible. It's impossible for one person to know another completely. And my grandmother and I were 2 generations apart. I know nothing about the beginning of her life except what I just learned. And very little about the middle. The strongest memories feel so unimportant. But that's all I have to share. I remember her sneaking candy and crackers to me and my sister when my parents weren't looking. She loved to snack. Anything crunchy, salty, or sweet would find their way into her pantry. I remember her frustration when we wouldn't let her spoil us. She always wanted to buy us clothes, food, jewelry, everything. But frightened of my mother's wrath, I would decline the goods. I remember a yellow dress my grandmother and my aunt bought me when I was 10. I wore it all the time. It was my favorite dress. It made me feel like Belle from Beauty and the Beast. I remember that summer when she taught me how to play mahjong. She was probably excited at the prospect of being able to play again now that we had 4 players. Herself, my aunt, my mother, and me. But I'm sorry to say I was a disappointment. The game lasted far too long for my patience, and after the first round, I'd leave, even though I knew she was letting me win. I remember the funny names she would substitute for American names she couldn't pronounce. For example, Carl's Jr. was Sing Sing because their logo is a star. This particular memory is foggy. I remember the 2 of us running down the street hand in hand because some crazy man was chasing us. I don't remember the reason or the location. It's just a random memory that I could never shake off. Most of all, I remember her kindness and her selflessness. She was always eager to share whatever she had, sometimes to the point of being annoyingly insistent. People say that the older you get, the mellower you become. Well, I hope with all my heart that that's true. Because my mother could definitely use a chill pill sometimes. In fact, I think we all do. We're always so concerned about getting from point A to point B that we forget the most important part, the path. Let's try to live our dashes to their fullest potential and forget about reaching point B because sooner or later we'll arrive somewhere. But in the process of getting to that somewhere, we make memories, and memories are the most important things we could possibly make, good or bad, because they are unique. And they define who we are and who we choose to become. Thank you.
Today we are gathered here not to mourn, but rather to celebrate an extraordinary human being. I like to think of it as a celebration of life. On April 7th, 2011, a much beloved woman, grandmother, mother, wife, and friend to all those who are fortunate enough to have been touched by this remarkable woman, passed away. For me, Mrs. Chang was my much beloved grandmother. When we heard the news of her passing, which happened in her sleep, it admittedly didn't so much surprise us as she had been bedridden and ill for quite some time. But as you can all imagine, we are all deeply saddened. As a granddaughter whose childhood was essentially guided by my grandmother, I share many fond memories of her. I remember her as the boundlessly doting and loving grandmother who showered me with love and food and was always eager to place the need of others above her own. In return, I fiercely loved my grandmother, whom I knew as Popo, because of her tireless love, affection, and support throughout my childhood. I so envisioned her to be such a permanent fixture of my life that I, as a self-assured 5-year-old, confidently declared that she would easily live long enough to meet my 37-year-old grandchild. And yes, I was that specific about his or her age. My point is that Mrs. Chang lived her life with a lot of love to give, and in return received a lot back. As a devout Christian, she gave herself wholeheartedly to the betterment of the community as well as her family and friends, many of whom are members of DCCC, which makes the holding of her ceremony here particularly fitting. My grandmother was a product of her time. Although she never had the opportunity to finish her education, she threw herself tirelessly into the war effort and was a Red Cross nurse during World War II. She was also the very devoted and loving wife of my grandfather and gave 3 wonderful children to him. Despite being a housewife in China during the 1950s, she never let that constrain and define her. My grandmother was straightforward with all of those who knew her and not afraid to express her opinions in a time when women were relegated to the background. I would also like to take this time to thank an equally great woman, my Aunt Christina, who devoted much of her life to living with and taking care of my grandmother. My grandmother was very grateful for the wonderful and unheedingly loyal companionship she was blessed with. Finally, thank you everyone for coming out to share your grief with us and being so generous in your comforting words. My family and I truly appreciate everybody's kindness.